The church smelled faintly of lilies and dust, that strange mix of life and death. The morning light filtered through stained glass, painting faded colors across empty pews. I sat there, my hands folded over my black gloves, staring at the casket that held my husband, Harold Pierce, my partner of 53 years. 53 years of breakfasts together, of shared silence and shared laughter, now sealed under polished mahogany and brass handles. And still, not a single one of our children had come. I had sent the messages myself. Your father's funeral is tomorrow morning at 10. Simple. Clear. I waited all week for a reply, for some acknowledgement. But there was only silence. Then at 9:45 that morning, as the organ began its mournful hum, my phone buzzed. It was Michael. Sorry, Mom. Diana's engagement party is tonight. We'll visit next week. Love you. I stared at the screen until the words blurred into meaningless shapes. I didn't reply. What could I say? That their father's hands had grown cold? That the man who once carried them on his shoulders was being lowered into the ground while they popped champagne? I wanted to hate them, I did. But hate requires energy, and I was tired. So terribly tired. The pastor began to speak, his voice echoing against the hollow church walls. We gather to remember the life of Harold Pierce. We? I thought. There was only me. I nodded along politely, but my mind drifted to the past, to Harold's smile as he fixed the old fence, the way he'd hum Sinatra while shaving, how he'd call me Ellie, in that soft voice no one else was allowed to use. We weren't perfect, God knows we'd fought enough, but we'd stayed. Through sickness, through loss, through growing old and being forgotten by the very ones we raised. A gust of wind pushed against the church doors, making them creak like an old confession. I took it as a sign. Maybe Harold had left, too. When the service ended, I walked to the casket. My knees trembled, but I leaned close and whispered, "You deserve better, love." We both did. My voice cracked. Even in death, they chose parties over you. I pressed my wrinkled hand against the wood one last time, tracing its smooth curve. My reflection stared back, a fragile woman with grief behind her eyes and 1,000 unspoken words on her lips. Outside, the cold air bit into my cheeks. I clutched my coat tighter. The driver who'd taken me here, a kind young man named Samuel, opened the car door and helped me in. "Anyone else joining you, ma'am?" he asked gently. "No," I said, forcing a smile. "It's just me today." The ride home was silent except for the faint hum of the tires on wet pavement. My mind wandered to the house, to the photos on the mantelpiece that showed smiling faces frozen in time, to the laughter that used to fill the hallways, to the silence that had replaced it. When we reached the gate, I noticed a man waiting by my front door, tall, silver-haired, wearing a dark overcoat. It was Mr. Connors, Harold's lawyer. His eyes were soft but uncertain. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, bowing his head slightly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your husband left something for you. Said it was to be given only after today." He handed me a thick envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with red wax. My name, Eleanor, was written in Harold's handwriting, the same script I'd seen on birthday cards and grocery lists for half a century. I held it close to my chest, feeling the faint weight of it. A final message, a whisper from beyond the grave. Then I saw the words beneath my name, barely visible in faded ink. For Eleanor. Only to be opened when she's ready to stop forgiving. For the first time in years, I didn't cry. I simply nodded and said quietly, "All right, Harold. Let's see where this takes us." The house greeted me with silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind, thick with memories and ghosts that refused to rest. Every corner seemed to whisper Harold's name, from the grandfather clock that still ticked too loudly to the dent in the hallway wall, where he once dropped a toolbox. I placed the envelope on the dining table, beside the vase of withered lilies left from the funeral. The paper looked innocent, almost fragile. But something about Harold's handwriting made my chest tighten. "When you're ready to stop forgiving." What did that mean? I poured myself a cup of tea, though it tasted more like loneliness than comfort. The house was too big now, too quiet. Every step I took echoed back at me, reminding me of laughter that had long since faded. I caught my reflection in the window. Hair silvered with time, eyes tired but still searching for something. When Harold and I bought this place 50 years ago, we thought it was the beginning of everything. We raised our children here. Christmas mornings, school projects, late-night talks about their dreams. I gave them everything I could, my time, my strength, my youth. And now, they wouldn't even give an hour for their father's farewell. I sighed and sat at the table. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the red wax seal. Inside were several folded papers, and a single handwritten letter. Harold's handwriting, uneven but deliberate. My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've likely just done what you always do, forgive them. I know you, my love. You make excuses for everyone but yourself. But I need you to stop. I've changed my will. Everything we built, the house, the savings, the company shares, now belongs to you. You alone. Our children will come asking. They'll say you're being unfair. They'll say I would have wanted them to have it. But I didn't. Not after what they became. If you wish, you may share it. But only if your heart truly says so. You have the choice now. The choice I never gave you when I asked you to keep forgiving. There's another letter in my study, locked in the safe. Open it when they come knocking. You'll know when that time comes. Love always. Harold. My breath hitched as I finished reading. Tears slipped down my cheeks, slow and quiet. Harold had known. He had seen the same coldness in our children that I had tried to ignore. The long years of being treated like burdens, like relics from another time. He had seen it all, and he'd acted in silence. His final gift wasn't just wealth, it was power. The power of choice. I rose from the chair, feeling a strange mix of grief and defiance. My slippers brushed against the old rug as I made my way to Harold's study, a room I hadn't entered since the day he died. The door creaked open, and the faint scent of cedar and old books filled the air. The safe sat in the corner, exactly where it always had. The code, our wedding date, still worked. Inside, a small brown envelope rested on a stack of documents, written across it in Harold's familiar scrawl. For when they come asking. I didn't open it. Not yet. But just knowing it existed gave me a strange sense of peace. Harold had always been gentle, sometimes too gentle, but in death he had left behind something fierce, a quiet kind of justice. I placed the envelope back inside and locked the safe again. Then I stood in the middle of the room and looked around at everything we had built. Photos, books, memories. It wasn't an empty house. It was a monument to endurance. As the clock struck midnight, I whispered into the silence, I've forgiven them enough, Harold. Maybe it's time they learn what love costs. The words lingered in the air like a promise. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel so lonely, it felt alive. It took less than a week. I knew it would. The first call came on a Thursday morning. The tone was sugary sweet, dripping with false sympathy. Hi, Mom, Diana began. I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up? Her voice was the same one she used on her followers when promoting her jewelry line. Polished, practiced, perfect. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I'm fine, dear. Just resting. There was a pause before she slipped in what she really wanted. I heard Mr. Connors stopped by the house. That was about the will, right? Daddy mentioned something before. He wanted us all taken care of. There it was. Not a word about the funeral. Not a single. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Just money. By evening all three had called. Michael with his clipped businesslike tone, Diana, pretending to care, and Clara, the youngest, pretending to mediate. Mom, she said softly. We're not trying to rush you. We just thought, maybe Dad left things unfinished. Nothing's unfinished, I replied. But if you'd like to talk, you can all come by tomorrow. 10 o'clock sharp. And they did. The next morning, I sat in the parlor waiting, wearing Harold's favorite shawl, the blue one he bought me for our 40th anniversary. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old wood polish. When the doorbell rang, I felt my stomach twist, but I kept my smile steady. They came in together, like a small uneasy army. Michael in his tailored suit, pretending he wasn't already calculating figures in his head. Diana perfectly styled, camera-ready even in grief. Clara clutching a tissue she didn't need. Mom, you look well, Michael said, glancing around. It's been a while since we were all here, huh? Yes, I replied softly. A very long while. We sat at the dining table, the same one where we'd once celebrated birthdays and Christmas dinners. I could almost see their younger faces flicker across the years, sticky hands, laughter, Harold carving turkey. All of it gone. So, Diana began, Mr. Connors told us Dad left everything to you. We were just wondering what the plan is. The plan? I repeated, stirring sugar into my tea. I suppose the plan is to live out my years in peace. Michael leaned forward, his voice sharp. Mom, be reasonable. You can't manage all this on your own. The properties, the shares, it's a lot. Dad would have wanted us to help. Help? I murmured. Like you helped with his funeral? The room went silent. Diana shifted uncomfortably. Clara looked down. I watched them squirm. 3 grown adults unable to face their reflection. I understand, I said finally. You were busy. Parties, jobs, lives. But your father deserved better. Mom, Clara began, her voice trembling. No. Interrupta. For years, I've watched you drift away. I told myself it was normal. Children grow up, make their own lives. But when he died, I waited in that empty church, and not one of you walked through the door. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. My voice stayed steady. He loved you more than anything, and you repaid him with absence. Michael sighed. We made a mistake. But he's gone now, and we can't change that. What we can do is make sure his legacy stays in the family. I smiled then, a small, tired smile. You're right, Michael. His legacy will stay in the family. Come back tomorrow morning. I'll have everything ready. Diana's eyes brightened. You mean? Yes, I said gently. I'll make sure each of you gets what you deserve. They left soon after, whispering among themselves as they went. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The house seemed to hum with quiet approval, as if Harold himself were watching from the study. I walked down the hallway, opened the safe, and took out the brown envelope he'd left me, for when they come asking. I held it in my hands and whispered, They've come, Harold. And tomorrow, they'll get exactly what they've earned. The night air outside rustled the trees as I lit a small candle beside his photograph. The flame flickered in the glass, reflecting his smile back at me, calm, knowing, almost proud. I took one last sip of my tea and whispered, Let's finish what you started. Morning sunlight spilled through the lace curtains, soft and golden. It was almost beautiful, ironic, considering what the day would bring. I dressed slowly, taking my time with every button, every fold of Harold's shawl around my shoulders. I wanted to look composed, not vengeful. Revenge, I had decided, should never shout. It should whisper. At 10 sharp, the bell rang. 3 knocks, confident, impatient. They arrived in their Sunday best. Michael in another suit, tie perfectly straight. Diana in a cream dress that probably cost more than Harold's casket. And Clara, sweet-faced and fragile, still pretending to be the peacekeeper. Morning, Mom, Diana chirped, her smile too wide. We brought you some pastries. Lovely, I said, taking the box and setting it aside without a glance. Coméin. The parlor looked just as it had yesterday, neat, quiet, unchanged. Except for one thing. On the mahogany table rested 3 envelopes, each with their names written in Harold's firm handwriting. They noticed them immediately. Michael raised an eyebrow. So this is it? Yes, I said softly, taking my seat. Your father and I always believed in fairness. What's in those envelopes represents exactly that. They exchanged glances, greedy, eager, nervous. I watched their faces as they reached for the envelopes, each tearing them open with trembling hands. Then the room fell silent. Inside each one was a letter, a photograph, and a single document, notarized and stamped. The photograph was from our last family dinner 15 years ago. Harold sat at the head of the table, smiling. The children looked younger, brighter, unguarded. I remembered that night. The last time we were all truly together before success and pride scattered them like autumn leaves. The letter was simple. Harold had written it himself before he died. To my children. If you're reading this, your mother has chosen to do what I hoped she would, to stop forgiving. Everything your mother and I built now belongs to the Pierce Foundation, created to care for elderly people who've been forgotten by their families, much like we were. You may not understand now, But someday, when you're older and sitting in a quiet room, you'll feel the same silence we did. Then perhaps you'll remember what love truly costs. With what remains of my love. Dad. Diana's mouth fell open. Michael turned red, gripping the paper until it crumpled. Clara began to cry, quietly at first, then with a deep, shaking sob. You gave it all away? Michael shouted, standing up. All of it. The houses, the company, the money? To strangers. Not strangers, I replied calmly. To people who know what it's like to be alone. Mom, this isn't fair. Diana's voice trembled between anger and disbelief. We're your family. I looked up at her, my voice soft but firm. Family? You left your father to be buried alone. You left me to sit beside an empty pew and pretend it didn't break my heart. Family isn't blood, Diana. Family shows up. Clara reached for me then, eyes red and wide. Mom, we made mistakes, but we still love you. I took her hand gently, brushing away her tears. I know, darling. And maybe one day, I'll forgive you again. But not today. They didn't stay long after that. There was shouting, then silence, then the sound of the front door closing with a hollow thud. When the last echo faded, the house was quiet again, but not empty. For the first time in years, it felt peaceful. I walked to Harold's study, sat in his old armchair, and opened the final note he'd left tucked in the drawer. Just a few lines, written in his unmistakable scrawl. Ellie, if you're reading this, it means you've done what I couldn't. You taught them. And now, my love, it's time to rest. Live your days as you once lived your love. Fiercely, quietly, completely. I smiled through my tears. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the maple trees Harold had planted the year Michael was born. Their leaves fell softly, golden and weightless, like forgiveness I was finally ready to let go of. I whispered toward the sunlight. Goodbye, my love. We did it. Then I closed my eyes and let the warmth of morning settle around me. Not as a widow's loneliness, but as a woman's peace. The world outside went on, cars passing, children laughing somewhere in the distance, and I sat there, wrapped in Harold's shawl, smiling. Because revenge, I had learned, doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it restores. And that morning, I finally felt whole again.